Welcome to another episode of Washington in Focus Daily. I'm Carleen Johnson, the Center Square's state government reporter, and this is day 38 of the legislative session in Olympia. So 22 days to go, and starting today, bills that have passed one chamber have moved to the opposite chamber and are starting to get public hearings. We're going to get into, in this episode, what Governor Ferguson said Tuesday about the Senate version of the income tax bill, or the millionaire's tax, as supporters call it, that passed off the Senate floor on Monday night. There was some good stuff in there, the governor says, some stuff he's not crazy about, some additional tax relief that he wants provided by the proceeds of the millionaire's tax. So we'll break that down a bit. I did ask Democrats some pointed questions in the media availability today about some of the Republican bills that are not advancing. So we're going to get into that. We touched on it in yesterday's podcast, bills that are attempting to redefine imminent harm for families that the state is working with, where the children are in homes, with drug addicted families, often fentanyl. Sometimes they, find traces of this stuff on a kitchen countertop or whatever, and record number of children have died or suffered critical near fatal incidents in our state in the last year. But for whatever reason, Democrats are not advancing those bills. It got heated on the House floor on Monday night between a couple of members. So I asked Democrats in today's media avail about that. So I'll share that response. And the initiative killer bill is dead, apparently. So we're going to touch on that a little bit as well. So first off, let's get into what Governor Ferguson thinks about the income tax bill that passed the Senate Monday. And just a little reminder, this is the 9.9% tax on income above $1 million. So you're not taxed on the first million, but say you make 1.2 million, you're taxed on that $200,000 at 9.9%. above the 1 million threshold, or because there's a marriage penalty in the bill as well, combined household income in excess of $1 million will be taxed at that 9.9% rates. During the Tuesday press conference, which I attended in the governor's office, he said he wants to expand, wants to use more of the profits from the millionaire's tax to go to working families' tax credit expansions and increase the check that everybody gets, basically the rebate check that everybody gets that qualifies, by 30%. So he says this would add another 460,000 families to the 350,000 who currently receive that tax break. He also said he wants to use $1 billion of the proceeds for tax relief for small businesses, wants to increase the small business tax credit, which he said would effectively, the level he wants to raise it to, effectively wipe out business and occupation taxes on the first $2.5 million in total revenue for that business. And his contention is this would translate into 170,000 small businesses in our state no longer paying any B&O tax at all. Today, during that Democratic leadership media avail, members said they are confident that the income tax bill is going to be signed into law. Remember, it's only passed the Senate at this point. It's gone to the House, though they said they do expect changes to be coming on the House side. So here's a little bit of that response today from Democratic leadership.
I share his optimism.
This morning, the members of Color Caucus in the House met with the governor to talk about this. It was one of the agenda items, but a number of other policy interests that were important to the caucuses.
This year in particular, I just felt like we had a number of bills that were in challenging situations for floor votes that members really worked hard in a bipartisan way on those bills to get them to be, it might not mean we had Republican votes for them, but there was less opposition and more willingness to move a bill. Many things came together very late that allowed us to just keep on rolling through bills that we thought maybe weren't going to be able to move this year, and were able to move. So that was, I think that's great work, and that's the kind of work that the people of this state want us to do.
So Ferguson, the governor, threw his support, I should say, behind an amendment to the income tax bill that was offered by Senator Nikki Torres of Pasco. It was rejected by Democrats on Monday, and it would include a sales exemption on diapers. Well, now the governor said Tuesday he wants that back in the bill. He expects that to be back in the bill, and not just diapers, but on other baby products. So I met today with Senator Torres in her office to get her reaction to his throwing his support behind her amendment.
Well, I'm really excited that he actually loves my amendment, and I actually had a bill on this as well, but since it was not going to get a hearing, I attempted an amendment on the income tax bill, and unfortunately my colleagues on the other side of the aisle did not accept it. So and now it sounds like maybe they will, because it's coming from the governor. A little skeptical, but I really wish they would have accepted it in the first place.
All right, now back to very passionate, very heated debate on the House floor on Monday night when Representative Travis Couture attempted to get leadership to pull a couple of bills that did not advance out of committee onto the floor. And they can do that. The majority can do that, even if the bill did not get a vote out of the committee where a public hearing was held, or in Couture's case, his bills never got a public hearing, but sat in those committees and idled. It got really heated because these are bills where the attempt is to redefine imminent harm. Because in the state of Washington, because of the Keeping Families Together Act, we have a lot of kids that even if the state has to respond, a child may have overdosed drug exposure, or there is serious neglect, abuse because of parents' drug addiction. The state tries very hard to keep those families together. And what it has done is ultimately cost the lives of many children in our state. And there have been many other critical, near fatal incidents. But these bills have not been advancing. So during today's Democratic media availability, I asked leadership about that today. And here's that response.
I want to ask, there were three bills, one sponsored by Democrat Alicia Rule to address the increase in child deaths and kids kind of languishing in these drug-addicted homes. I know Rule's bill got a hearing, but no vote out of committee. The other two did not get hearings. And there was also Senate Bill 5071, which passed the Senate with near unanimous support to update the endangerment with a controlled substance statute. So I know the House has not taken up that bill. Senator Braun mentioned in the media avail yesterday that he thinks this is the fourth year in a row that that's been blocked. So specifically, Representative Fitzgibbon, since you engaged with Rep. Couture on the House floor so passionately Monday night, can you explain why we're going to go yet another year without fixing this?
Well, I believe there's. Did Senator Braun's bill come over just this session?
Torres.
Or the Torres bill? Yeah, I mean, I believe there's time for that committee to consider that proposal. So
is it going to be considered?
I can't speak for that committee and what their intentions are. I do know that they've been looking at the issue of child welfare very seriously. There was a bill by Representative Ortiz-Self that did move out of that committee to address critical incidents in child welfare settings. There's an honest difference of opinion among legislators about what is the best way to keep kids safe. And you know, what I took exception to on the floor was the assertion that some of us care more about that than others. I don't think that's true. I think that all 98 House members care about keeping kids safe, and we are not unanimous about the right way to go about that and the right way to also support keeping families together. I know that committee has been looking at that issue and will continue to look at that issue in the context of the bill from Senator Torres that came over.
But if we don't change the imminent harm standard for another year, then it's still going to be very difficult to get those kids in safe environments. And so I'm wondering why those bills aren't moving.
Can I just, that presumes that that is the solution to the problem.
That taking that out?
The question about the imminent harm, you're presuming that that's the solution. When you look at the work that we did a couple of years ago to make it more clear to the courts about what they could take into consideration with regard to removal, in the critical incidents have shrunk dramatically in that time since we passed that bill. I would never argue that it's the only thing that we should do. So we are continuing to look at what we should do. Honestly, from my public health perspective, what would have been best is 10 years ago when there was a proposal to offer nurse family home visiting across the state of Washington to all families in need, that the Republicans opposed vociferously and we weren't able to do. That is the thing that would have actually helped the very, very best.
Okay, and finally, in case you missed my article up at the Center Square Washington page late on Tuesday, the initiative killer bill appears to be dead. Now, nothing's ever really dead until sine die. Here in Olympia, things can always, get resurrected. But this is the bill that would have required a pretty significant obstacles, I'll just put it that way, for somebody that wants to back an initiative, whether it's Brian Haywood with Let's Go Washington or somebody else seeking to gather signatures to overturn a law or a policy that's been signed into law that they don't like here in Washington. They would have to go to the Secretary of State with the initial 1,000 signatures, basically to prove, look, everybody's going to support this thing when I go out and gather more signatures. At that point, they'd get a title for the measure and begin the process of gathering signatures. The bill also said that you could no longer pay signature gatherers per signature. You could still pay them by the hour, but you couldn't pay them for every signature that they gathered. Supporters of that said, we need to make sure that folks aren't there getting double, triple signatures. We want to make sure that they, incentive isn't there to for signature gatherers to be cheating. So that bill didn't go, though. It got a very robust public hearing, but it never was voted out of the committee that it was heard in. And during the media avail today, asked about that, Democratic leadership just said, we simply didn't have the votes to get it out of committee. Now, again, that said, things can get resurrected. For now, it appears to be dead. And of course, a lot of Washingtonians who hold the initiative process here in our state to be, their only recourse sometimes for pushing back on one-party rule in this state are loudly applauding that. I've seen the social media posts since the announcement yesterday that this bill was dead for the session. So that's it for today's episode of Washington in Focus Daily, day 38 of the session. We'll have a lot more coming from tomorrow's hearings, more public hearings. I said on bills that have passed one chamber, have moved to the opposite chamber, and we're going to be sitting in on some of those public hearings on some of the significant pieces of legislation. I'm told the income tax bill probably isn't going to get a public hearing on the House side until next week. So as soon as we know the date on that, we will pass that information on to all of you. For now, thanks for watching another episode of Washington in Focus Daily. Check out thecentersquare.com. Thanks for watching.